there's two things, and I had these for earlier, but I think if it kind of fits here, and I'm going to keep it super brief because we want to do this like 30 seconds or so. But I always talk about like problem domain, and you might have seen this on the website when we had conversations beforehand, and I wanted to just clarify what I mean by that, and so then that feeds into the component stuff. So the idea is that let's say that you're working on a route planning problem, right? You go from A to B, you figure out the steps, and you do your solution, algorithm, application that does that. But then if you want to do like another route, you need to keep adding the steps and so on and so forth. So that kind of like makes it a little like unmanageable as the problem and the requirements change over time. If you instead map the problem domain of route planning and maps and figure out what are the different components and things that play into that, then over time your solution becomes more manageable, easier to extend, and easier to work with. That's kind of the idea around working with the problem domain. And so within that, the idea is that if you have like an ecosystem of reusable components, it's easier to get up and running with new projects when the requirements change ever so slightly. What you're going to see in the afternoon and tomorrow morning in the next presentation is that there's a lot of applications that are very similar, but they're also very different in terms of the use case. So they have a lot of components that are similar, but then there is the details that make it tailored for like a specific use case. So in that sense, this is something I'm interested in, is looking at like what are the things that we can abstract from existing projects, make into components that are mostly reused, and then allow people to like create this kind of ecosystem of components and see who else is interested in that.
So Pietro will be very likely leading a pod of people to hack on very practical things that we can do. And in a way, is one of the goals of the whole event is, can we get an index of components and move towards a world in which we have lots of small pieces loosely joined, libraries, conventions that we can all rely on for our common applications. If you're interested in that, just shout out or put your name here. Does anyone want to elaborate on that idea or provide a perspective on what we might actually be able to get done with a few days of hacking?
One of the things we need for reusable components is some sort of standards format for interfacing between all the applications we're missing. I don't know if that's on the list.
Yeah, that's kind of like the very closely tied to that. There's one that I had here, which is a transcription specification, which is sort of like what Blaine mentioned in his presentation, and that is very closely connected with that conversation as well.
While we're at it, is there anyone who's interested in the specifics of what a specification might look like? Yeah. Okay. For Lauren and Markdown, possibly. One idea for creating an ecosystem of reusable components might be, should we have a GitHub group? Mm-hmm. And we can just all collaborate and create a kind of database where we can get access to.
Cool. You can feel free to add yourself to that in the list, and we can move on to the next one.
You want to take the next one?
Yes. So the next one is for so like a lot of applications have these issues around like once you got the transcriptions and it's got time codes, how do you work with that? So if Alex, you can say something about that and your experience with it.
Cool. Yeah. So lots of people are using automated speech text to get transcripts of their content, and then using those transcripts in whatever workflows. And automated speech to text, in a lot of cases, it can be very good. It gives very good results, but it's almost never going to be completely perfect. And for a lot of uses, you do want kind of completely accurate transcripts. So there's a need for a way to correct the mistakes inherent in the automated transcripts, but still retaining the rich time data. So I've kind of created an editor that I can talk a little bit more about. So I know lots of other people have their own editors kind of as part of wider projects, products use. It could be interesting to see if a kind of open source anti-driven editing component can fill people's needs and what that would look like.
I mean, are these things happening at the same time, or?
Right now, we're just trying to get it all out there.
Mm.
Right. And then we can coordinate.
Yeah, we can organize it so that they're like they're not at the same time if you want to be more than one. So just put your name to it.
I think that you guys newsletter work with Amara and platforms like that, if I'm not mistaken. Do you have any elaboration on this or anything you want to add?
We have worked tomorrow for a while with some social projects with that. Definitely like reflecting like our live broadcast captions are horrible quality. I sort of mentioned kind of virtually I think was in that archive talked about improving those live captions without high quality transcripts. So if there's some way for us to kind of use some kind of text to speech, something to improve the quality.
Has anyone here used Cadet yet, which is a tool from the WGBH's accessibility office? Because they kind of pitched it as like an offline version of Amara, because Amara, your stuff had to be hosted in a service, which was like YouTube or Vimeo or something like that, which is not particularly useful for further upstream if stuff is not yet published. Wondering, it's a fairly new tool. It's not open source, I don't think. No, but it's from the, if you search WGBH NCAM Cadet, yeah.
If you're interested in diving in, but maybe add your name to this section here, and then we can just keep going. I think the idea here is just to start identifying who's who in the room. Captioning and automated alignment. What do you have in mind?
Yeah, so this is actually something that I'd come across. I think there's a few folks, and remind me who you are if I forget, but like especially someone that could not be here, but I think he's following remotely. It's called Alberto, and he's doing the work with Aeneas, if I'm pronouncing it right, which is basically like the same sort of thing that YouTube does when you give it some text, and YouTube captioning gives you back the SRT file. And then there's also someone else called Joseph, which is also remote, who is done like a workflow. There's like a Trello card that describes that, where you can basically like do your whole transcription workflow and realign it and do the alignment and the breaking down into chunks for you. So this part is basically concerned with if I have some text and I want to get an SRT file, and I don't want to have to spend time like breaking down the lines, making it fit in 35 characters and all the specification that has got, like what can we do about like some kind of algorithm that helps with that? And there's already quite a lot of work that people have done in that space. So it's kind of like putting it together and making it so that can be used by others.
It sounds like there's maybe something in common with the previous part we talked about. Just moving through really quickly.
So the other one is kind of for captioning, like moving between formats, parsing captions, creating captions. So if Gary, you want to say something about that?
Yeah, so on the web, there are two, at least SpecWeb that we receive, there are two big formats, TPML and WebVP. WebVP has a pretty well-known parser called WebJS, but it's pretty old and not well maintained. So updating that, and also I have most of the TPML parser, but it's kind of like embedded in the WebJS plugin. So pulling that out and using components is good, especially because Apple is adopting TPML as the new like live stream format. I can see YouTube, so it'd be good to parse that, and maybe there are other captioning formats like useful parse as well.
Cool.
Anybody has any experience with web captioning and is interested in working on that? Maybe just add your name here. You want to elaborate on any of that? Something you're personally interested in?
So I actually made some documents with JS. Yeah, I've done a lot of work with it. I'm curious to hear more about
We run it a bit different because we have some EU standards, but currently on BC plan, potentially in some places just because they're really not
moving through, we have.
So I moved one because it makes more logical sense, I guess. So this other one is like captioning workflows, and I put down Gideon
Yes.
for that. Yeah.
So in the kind of real world, in the newsroom, video kind of goes on this journey. You shoot it. Maybe you have some rushes. Maybe it's in a media asset management system. There's some export process. Maybe you publish it into some API, and then there's some web page or front end where it's visible to people. And I'm really interested in where subtitling and transcription fits in those workflows. So where can we plug in these kind of services people are building into the APIs and CMSs people are building, even if that's off the shelf or commercial things or open source things. So trying to fit those bricks together in a kind of neutral buffer.
And what do you think that would look like in a practical multi-day hacking experience?
Yeah, it's a good question. I was thinking of doing a kind of showdown of different off-the-shelf tools and comparing them in terms of how practical they are to integrate and stuff like that.
We could work on a showdown.
Then this connects with Mark's presentation from the morning. If Joanna, you want to say something about the interactive transcriptions, this is more like client-side stuff.
Yeah, I guess I'm interested in this in the context of sorts, different ways of leverage transcriptions and considering the useful time, or the useful time. So I guess I'm interested in taking out the useful workflows that we're talking about and figuring out how to use stories in easier, better ways, / also ways to do this. But as a user who mostly work on text and just interfaces, more audio.
Cool. Is anybody interested in this space of like more client-side representation of the transcription and like user-facing?
I have a big problem. I'm interested in all this space.
Yeah, that's the same problem I have.
Should we be marking everything we're interested in?
Yes, I would say at this stage, just put your name to everything you're interested in, even if it's everything. Then we can kind of like figure it out as we get along.
What we want to try to do is find like critical mass on a handful of things that people are really interested in working on.
Yeah.
And ideally avoiding hanging out eating pizza and talking, although
Corbin.
there'll be plenty of time for that as well.
Yeah, it's good. So
it's good timing, right?
Yeah, it's perfect timing. So next up, we're almost done. There's a lot of speech-to-text services, and if Mark, you want to say a little bit about that. The idea is like the reason why I asked Mark to look into this is that whenever you start a project, you're always thinking which speech-to-text service should I use, and it's always hard to be like, oh, I'm using that one because it's the most accurate. So we're looking into like, is there a way to do a programmatic comparison?
Yeah, it would be great to sort of come together and compare all the different tools. Firstly, get an idea of all the tools that exist, and then figure out ways that we can establish the quality of the tools on a number of levels. That's accuracy, how long it takes for results to come back, and I suppose price as well is another variable. I created a very, very simple tool that's just based on a diff tool, which just finds the differences in things, so that you can feed in a perfect transcript and the one that's come out of a speech-to-text tool, then it gives you a kind of score, which isn't the perfect way of measuring transcripts. Lauren's got some ideas around that as well, but it gives you an indication, and it might be something that we can put on GitHub as a shared resource or something else where we produce this information that will be useful for a lot of different people.
And this also connects with the one that I added on the Trello board last night, which is some work done by Joseph around captioning workflow, and as part of that, he also did a comparison of speech-to-text services using a similar diff tool with like Terminal. So there's a lot of interest in that space as well. If anybody else wants to join on that. Does anyone else wants to add anything to that before we go on to the next bit? Okay. Then Chris, if you want to say something about the EDL composer and like creating EDLs from transcriptions.
Yes, I suppose the EDL composer can be two things. One, it can be taking your text and generating an EDL to replay that immediately in the browser, for instance.
just what's an EDL for folks that don't know?
Sorry, so an EDL
Sorry.
is an edit decision list, and that just basically says, how you edit the audio to get what you want. So it basically is a list of in the hand times, so like this bit to that bit, and that bit to this bit. So it can be two things. One can be just previewing, I guess, your edits. Another thing to me is generating a file which can be operated with things like or audio editor, things like that. So I don't know, I mean, the first one's fairly trivial, it kind of really is integrated with the text editor. And then the other one is more difficult because you're using proprietary formats or writing software to standards that might not exist already.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing about this one is that it also connects with the EDL specifications, and not specifications so much, but like interfaces,
Yeah.
because creating the EDL is, once you figure out the format and stuff, it's not that complicated, but agreeing on like what's the JSON representation of your sequence, that is something that is kind of like the key to then be able to use it in other contexts as well. And that the reason why I'm thinking about that is because projects like the BBC video context, which there's a remote presentation you'll see later, but it allows you to like do what the forecasting example showed. Imagine if you could export that as an EDL and then import it into the video editing software. Like that is that type of
Okay, so things like
yeah.
defining an EDL and then converting that to popular software formats.
Chris, does each different application, and you'll know this as
Mm.
well, have slightly different versions of EDL? Is that what you're just saying?
I think they all have
Their own sort of
Mm.
flavor.
in some cases they'll have the reverse engineering. They're not all very difficult.
Yeah. There's- Yeah, we
we
can-
are reverse engineering as well, that's all.
So Chris is a good thought partner if in the next few days you're just in EDL.
AI pipeline.
AI pipeline.
AI pipeline.
Yes.
Wow, there's people on it already. So the kind of what I already talked about, but more structured. The need is we have all this data that we haven't extracted. We need to find out ways to extract it. Functionally, that means what is the environment that we're going to extract it in? What are the algorithms we're going to use to do the extraction? What is it we're going to try to extract? And then how do we spread the glorious data that we pull out? So what is the pipeline for distribution? So I think that's kind of 4 different types of problem, and we could pick off just one, or we could explore them all.
And are you interested in doing this exclusively at the archive or more generalizably?
Everything that I have built so far is open source, and you can plug in. If you have video, you can plug in that video to it. So I think both. I figure other people don't need to worry about the archive stuff. So
So is,
broadly, yeah.
is it fair to say that like we could get started on what an ecosystem of open source tools would look like for them?
Yeah, I do think so. Because ideally we would have a system that is able to plug in. I mean, the archive is a great database to store as one potential distribution, but I think the ecosystem of tools, it'd be great to have a community building those instead of poor old me and so yeah.
Cool. If I'm pronouncing it like Ebel? Yeah. So I see you just added something. You want to say something about it?
Yeah, so, after a video is this caption for subtitles, and we have to display that on the web using either browser APIs or using stuff we build in our video players. There are some shortcomings for offerings out there. For instance, we can't remove an extract happening added and automatically to a video. It's kind of crazy to me. And also, some of the properties on like a single cue, which is just individual line of text that you see on the video in real time, aren't detailable. So it would be nice to get those things in respect and get browsers to adopt them, because the better that you have your video players is the better your website will perform. Gary and I have talked about the specs before, so
Cool.
Anybody want to quickly shout out things that they think should be on the agenda? This is not your only opportunity, but
Yeah.
okay. I don't think so, because you know that you're from pizza. So just to give you a sense of where this is going, we have lots more presentations today where lots of folks, most folks in fact, will be sharing the work, and you'll get a better sense of what each person thinks can be done. But by the end of the day, it would be great if you could think about which of these areas we can make some tangible contribution over the week. So obviously there's some value in getting together and just talking. But if you're really big on building a parser and you think that we might be able to make some headway on that, think about what that would look like and who you would work with. And by the end of the day, just if you can have an idea of what you'd be interested in doing, just so we can communicate to others, that would be great. Otherwise, you can enjoy the presentations that will continue throughout the day. Now we have pizza. How long do we have to eat pizza, Mr.
I think. Just double check